I'm going to set the hook in the vise, and whoops, I forgot, I better pinch my barb while I'm at it. Now I'll pinch the barb, set the hook in the vise, and start a thread base just behind, about 1 eye width behind the hook eye, while Gretchen reviews the recipe with you.
The recipe begins with a hook, a dry fly hook, a size 12 to 18. And then for thread you need rust. And then when we get to the tail, we'll use a badger rooster hackle fibers. And actually what we're going to use is brown. So you can substitute brown or a variant hackle. The rib is going to be a fine silver wire. The body is pheasant rooster tail fibers. And for the hackle, again, you can use the badger or the brown variant. And then, of course, we're going to whip finish the head and cement it. And that's all of our materials.
Okay, per the instructions, I started just behind the eye, about 1 eye width on the shank, and wrapped to the end of the shank, which is a position when the thread is hanging straight down that lands at the throat of the barb, or in this case, the barb is pinched where it used to be, or at the end of the shank, which is at the end of the flat part and where the round part starts. But anyway, you can see where that is. Got that in position, and we'll get ready to tie on the tail. And the tail is going to be made out of some hackle barbs.
And notice how he pulls the barbs away from the stem rather than stem away from the barb, and that keeps them, the tips even.
I'm going to measure them for length, and the length, according to the instructions that you'll find in the book, in proportions, is equal to the length of the shank. And so we'll hold it above the shank and work our fingers. See how I work my fingers back and forth until I get it the proper length, and then I'll set it at the end of that shank and tie it in position. Notice that I'll bring the fiber slightly to my side of the hook, allowing thread torque to roll that up on top.
And the reason we use the 10 to 15 fibers is that that's enough to support the fly when it lands.
All right, now I'm going to trim off the waist. The next item in our recipe is the wire. And in the instructions in the book, you'll find the wire being placed from this side of the vise on the bottom of the hook. And with the camera positioned where it is, which I've got a camera and a tripod between me and the fly, it's a lot easier if I'll work from this side so I don't keep running into the camera. So I'll anchor that with a couple of turns, and I'm going to bend the U that they talk about in the book so that the wire does not pull out. And now I'll start wrapping towards the end of the hook shank, positioning my wire. Now the wire is going to be on the off side of the hook, and that's exactly where I want it when I get ready to do the wind, to wind it, because it will be reverse wound. Now let's take a moment to talk about something that's kind of important. First, in proportions. My scissors right here are showing you the 1/3 front, or the 1/3 part of the hook. That's the front 1/3, and that's where the hackle's going to go. The back 2/3 is where the body's going to go. So you got about a 1/3 and 2/3. I need to come forward just a little bit more to get it to be 1/3 and 2/3. Let's see, there's 2/3 and 1/3. Okay, that's just about the right proportions. And the other thing we need to narrate to is something that could cause some confusion, and that is the name variant. And in the olden days, back in the days before all the genetic hackle that we have here in the United States, probably in the 80s and 70s and 60s and earlier, a variant was a fly with an oversized hackle, usually about 2 1/2 times the gap of the hook. Over the years, as good genetic hackle has come on the market, we've had an opportunity to have a lot better quality hackle, like this one that we're looking at right here, and that is a lot smaller. So the hackle is, instead of 2 1/2 times, now we're just using the standard measurements that we do for any dry fly, which is the tail equal to the hook shank, and the hackle is equal to 1 1/2 times the span of the gap. Okay, with this in place, we will move on to the next step. The next item on our list is pheasant tail. I'm going to strip out several pheasant tail fibers here. How many does it say
It
to do,
says
Gretch?
about 4 of them, and then you take those 4 and tie them by the tips.
Okay, the tip. I got a bad one in there too. I want to get rid of that, so we'll get rid of that right there.
And then you bind those down, and then take the thread back up to where you want to stop the wrapping of it.
Okay, let me get rid of that. There, that's the one I wanted to get rid of. Good. Now we'll just
Trim them off even.
tie it on the underside of the hook, wrap to the end of the shank, and here's an area that you don't want to get into trouble. If you go too far, and it's real easy to do, your thread is going to slip off and it's going to tilt your tail down, and your evaluator will not care for that. You need a tail that's straight out. Now I'm going to come forward back to the starting point, back one eye width back from the eye, and wrap forward to meet that thread.
Now be sure that you don't twist it as you do it. You want those fibers just to lay flat. So notice how he's using his finger to hold it as he comes around and picks the bets up on the other side.
Yeah, if you don't do that, boy, it tends to twist, and it's sure easy to break the darn things too. If you think this is the first time we've tied this, you're wrong. This is another time through, and there's one that just broke free.
Oh, but you can.
But I think I can probably salvage that, and we'll see here in just a moment if that will work or not. You tie that off. Now, that can trim away. And
As long as you look at it and you haven't left any gaps, you can just trim off those broken ones.
yeah,
That looks good.
that looks like that's going to be just fine. Now let me bind that down a little bit.
Now he's going to, as he
Trim
binds
off
it,
the
he's going to
extra.
go back a ways.
Yeah, now I'm going to go back to the starting of the hackle position, which is 1/3. Remember, 1/3 in the front for the hackle, 2/3 in the back for the body. Now it's time to apply the rib, and we're going to counter wrap the rib. And you won't have to do this, but I got to slip in here with my thumb, cover that up momentarily so I can get it to the other side, because otherwise the camera is in my way and I cannot get that all the way around there. In fact, I just bumped the camera just a second there. I hope it didn't bounce you around too much.
And you want to put about 4 or 5 wraps. We prefer 5.
Yeah, 5 is right now it doesn't say in the recipe, but we're looking for 5 turns is what we would prefer, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll go ahead and bind that off.
And then instead of cutting the wire, you can wiggle it back and forth. And if it's fine, that helicoptering of it should make it come off.
And I just pop loose. And one of the things I like to do is there's enough wire there to use again later. So I'm going to take a hackle pliers and just put it in the end of those hackle pliers so I can find it, because I don't know about you, but if I lay it down on the table, I can't find it again.
Now notice how he left enough space there to put on his hackle and to put a head on the fly.
Now I've already stripped off some fibers there off the stem, so that's ready to go. And per the instructions in the book, we have the dull side and the shiny side. And in the book they ask us to have the fibers facing forward, which means we want the dull side facing forward. And we'll just tie that on. And I want to show you a little trick. I want you to notice that there's no fibers right here. And that, if we don't do that, let me show you what happens. I'll back up. I'll pull on that, tie it down. And what you'll end up with, see how those fibers are back along the shank? And your instructor and your evaluator won't much care for that. So I'm going to pull that out so I have just bare stem, so that the first turn of hackle allows the fibers to lay straight. Okay, I'll just trim off the waist end of that hackle now and get it out of my way. It's getting to be kind of a pain in the neck. Wrap up to the hook eye, and now I'm going to prepare to wrap my hackle. Just like I have with some other materials, though, I have to move in with my hand and kind of hold the fibers, keep them from coming undone, because I have a camera between you and me. But I'm going to wrap these just as close as I can together, making a nice hackle application. Just like the book says, if you're going to have a little bit of hackle, or too sparse of hackle, or too heavy, a little bit too heavy is a little bit better. And we'll just
The number of wraps too will vary with the quality of hackle you have.
Yeah, and we're doing a little bit bigger hook here too, so you can better see what we're doing, and that's kind of important as well. Now I'm going to pull this and tie it off, hold it up, reach in, and take a couple of turns to anchor that in place. A couple more turns, and a nice way to, I'll pull that back now so you can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to wrap a thread hackle or thread head up against that hackle, pushing it back out of the way. I've got a couple fibers that got away from me, and that's what scissors are for. I'll trim off the waist, dress up my fly, and I'll use a half hitch tool this time to apply a half hitch. Then I'm going to put 2 turns to do a whip finish, and if you prefer a whip finish with a whip finish tool, works fairly well. I'll try to do that without running into my camera. There we go. And there's a whip finish with a whip finish tool, and I'll trim that off. And now it's time to do an evaluation on that fly.
Okay, let's start with the overall appearance and proportions. We're looking to see if the fly generally looks good and if it's 1/3, 2/3 like it's supposed to be.
And that looks to be right on target.
Looks good to me. And then consistency. Do all the flies look the same? And since we only tied 1 fly, we can't measure that.
Sure.
Material selection.
Our material selection is right on. We did substitute a color of hackle, but that's just fine, and it says so right in the book.
Right in the book, so we're good there. Tail. Now the tail, we're looking to see that it's the right length and to see that it's not pulled down and it's not flared. So you want to check the length on that tail?
The tail is, let's verify the length that it's equal to the shank. We'll just use the scissors for a caliper and set that in place. And that's pretty close to the proper length. What else is on the tail?
Is it sitting up equally on the top of the hook? Is it all on the top of the hook?
No, it's setting slightly to the side towards the camera. Had I given it just one little twist with my fingers, it would have been directly on top, and that will be a demerit right there.
Okay, so we got one down so far.
Okay.
We'll go to the body.
All right.
We want to check to make sure that you didn't twist the pheasant and that you it's all nicely covered and even.
It's all that, but remember back when we broke the 1 fiber and trimmed it off? I should have done a better job, and I left a little one right here, and that's another demerit. So that's 2 points off.
Okay, and now we want to talk about the ribbing. We've got that fine silver ribbing that should be about 5 turns and equal distance between the turns.
And it is. We've got 5 turns. We've already counted them out. There is one problem with the rib that's going to cause us another demerit. The last turn, right here where I'm pointing, and the hackle, that distance is different than the rest of the turns of the ribbing. So there's another dinger. So we've got, what is that, 3 now?
That's 3 now.
Okay.
Now the hackle, we're looking to make sure you don't have any wild hair sticking out of order on that hackle.
Okay, and we do have a problem with the hackle. We've got 1 fiber here that's, it's marginal whether we would mark off on it or not. Probably it's okay, but it would have been nice if I would have just reached in with the scissors and trimmed that out. It's a marginal thing whether it would be a mark off or not. We'll let it slide for now.
And the hackle looks about the right length?
Hackle looks the right length, nicely placed.
Okay.
No gaps between each turn and all that type of stuff.
Okay, now the head. What are we looking for on the head of that fly?
The head is properly proportioned, which should be about the same size as the width of the hook eye. It is. We shouldn't have any material sticking out, and unfortunately we have a small one sticking out of the head. I think you can see that. Let me pull back, and you can see that fiber sticking up on the head there. and that shouldn't be, and that's going to be a demerit right there. So I've got 4 demerits on this fly.
Okay, well that's it then. So we've got, out of 24 possible points, you got 20 then.
Well, then I passed, but I could have had a perfect fly had I made just a couple minor adjustments.
Okay.